Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.
Thank you, fearless listeners, and go you for hitting play. Please like and subscribe as it helps us grow. Also, share this with a friend as we have to keep talking about this shit. Now let's dive in. Coming up on today's edition of Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about, our guest is Jeannie Dougherty. Jeannie is a money expert and mental fitness guide. If you want to get in control over your money, sleep better at night, and stop playing the money game, then Jeannie is your go-to expert. I personally love what Jeannie has to offer. Women want to know where to get started, and this is a great place to start if you just feel like your money is out of control. Jeannie works with people in so many situations, and today we're going to focus on the financial impacts of caregiving and how it can cause strain on your financials, and sometimes without even knowing it. And as we know, there's a tsunami of caregiving coming our way. With 10,000 people turning 65 every day for the next 7 years, caregiving will be something most women will be in charge of. And the stats say that the oldest daughter handles the caregiving and typically the oldest son handles the financial situation. So let's see how Jeannie can help.
Gloria Steinem once said, "We will never solve the feminization of power until we solve the masculinity of wealth." Barbara Provost and Maggie Nielsen are the team at Purse Strings that will help you navigate the ins and outs of financial independence so that you can be financially fearless. This is Women in Money, the shit we don't talk about.
Jeannie, we are so excited to have you join us today. We know you have an important story to share as well as some important tips we all need to know. But before we jump in, could you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yes. My name is Jeannie Dougherty or Dougherty. Either way is totally fine. And I am a money expert and mental fitness guide. And I'm also a former caregiver to both of my parents. And I have enormous amount of wealth to share with you today.
Can we just start by diving in and hearing a bit about your story as you were a caretaker to both your parents?
Sure. So what happened is I was an undergrad and is when my father first was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And it was like, what is this? We weren't really sure. We weren't given a lot of information. It was very unclear. We were just told that he had Alzheimer's and that he was going to forget some things.
And how old were you and how old was he at the time?
My dad was about 63, just ready to turn 63. No, he just turned 63. Yeah, he had just turned 63. And I was 17 in undergrad. This is when it all started. He was good with his money, had no problems there. And he even was married to his second wife. So life seemed to be okay. Where things shifted is when he went to go move from what his usual routine was, his work, seeing his kids on the weekends, and he moved up to his big retirement home, which he had the money to build. And that's when all of a sudden the symptoms seemed to be out of control and things really shifted for him.
Mm. And so were you near him at the time? Was he living near you?
He was about 4 hours away because I was down at Tucson. He was up in Arizona, up in Prescott. So that's about 4 hours away. And so I would try to get off time from school to see him. There were expectations like for spring break for me to come up and see him. And why? Because his memory was fading.
Your father really seemed to be declining, but you said he remembered who you are, right? So when did the caregiving start?
So originally my stepmother thought she was just going to take care of him and that eventually he would just lay in a bed and that would be easy for her, right? She would just come and bring him food and water, etc. Because she said she had done that for her mother, but that wasn't entirely true. Her mother was actually in a nursing home for the last 10 years of her life was when she finally passed. But I think the expectation that she held that she was going to take care of my dad, it was upsetting for her because he didn't remember her. So within about the first year, things weren't going well. So she started to have what we call like, she would hire a caregiver to come in and take care of my dad. That was a good thing. That was a good thing. He needed that. The caregiver was skilled, knew how to work with him because he was a bit of a runner. So what does that mean? It means that my father would want to just leave the house. He had somewhere to go, but he couldn't maybe use the words or tell us exactly where he wanted to go. Like, would you like us to take you for a drive? You want us to take you to the store? You want me to take you to the bank? Blah, blah, blah. Nope. He just wanted to go. So he would just take off, like he'd open up the back door and he would run out the door and run down the street. So the neighbors would call and be like, your husband's out, ma'am.
Oh,
and
poor
so
guy.
yeah, so we would have to it would be up to me to literally, go chase him down and bring him back, and then walk him like a mile and a half or 2 miles back to the house by the time I found him. Or it would be that, she would get in the car, my stepmother, and go pick him up. And, because the neighbor would just be like, okay, I'm going to have him here and invite him in for tea, So so basically the neighbors kind of put it to her that she needed to do something. Like she couldn't let him keep running because it was a windy road. And so people weren't looking for an old man running down the street like in the middle of it. So he was going to get hit. So she put him in a home. The first one didn't quite work out. And again, it was because he was a runner. They were like, well, we have our care facility. And then he would open up the door and take off down the road again. And so she had to find I would say they had more structure. They were more prepared for somebody who would run. So they had more safety locks. And so what my dad would do at that care home is like, as soon as somebody opened the door, because it was just a regular house, it was a care home, he'd be like right there ready to jump out. And so you'd have to like, put your hand up and like grab his hands. Hi, it's so nice to see you. And try to get him away from the door. We'll go for a walk later, because you had to kind of grip onto him if you were going to take him for a walk, even in the backyard, because he would be like, I'm going to get to the gate. Because he remembered how to unlock doors. He just didn't know how to like tell anybody what he needed. So that actually it was an interesting sort of experience in my own, becoming a professional and doing the things that I do now, that I was able to observe my father from a nonverbal perspective. So I was able to see and pay attention to more of what he wanted and what he didn't want. And I was able to adapt pretty easily to that. And others in my family, particularly my stepmother, did not. They were like still expecting him to answer. And I was like, well, I don't know when he's going to answer. Nobody seems to know. Because I'd ask the staff, is he talking? And they'd be like, no. Okay, well, he's not talking. I don't know why he's not talking. So I would come up to him. I would either pantomime eating or drinking, or I take his hand, want to go for a walk? Do you want to sit on the couch? What do you want to do? And because of that, I think my father knew that I was still connected to him. And so he stayed with me, like mentally and emotionally, he was there. But eventually it got to the point he would remember me in the beginning. And then he would just drift mentally and he wouldn't remember, what he was doing, like who I was. Like all of a sudden it was kind of like a new thing. Oh, you're here. Who are you again? And, but that was expected with the illness, that he would not be able to maintain the contact because the illness, your brain is literally shrinking with Alzheimer's or dementia. So memory, concentration, fine motor skills, decision making, all that starts to go away as the brain is still operating at a level to keep you breathing, keep your heart moving, to make sure that your muscles are fine. So my father was physically fit until I think really about the last year. Then he became bedridden, meaning finally the fine motor skills stopped and he couldn't really walk and go places. He had to sit in a chair and, that kind of thing. But that again was expected with the illness, that he would eventually lose that. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that the symptoms are moving through the body and through the brain. That's why you will have these dips or everything's fine. And all of a sudden it feels like they just jump off a cliff. Like all of a sudden you don't know what happened to them. You don't know why they fell down. You don't know why they're staring at the wall. You don't know if they had a seizure, all that. But that altered level of consciousness, that's what they call it medically speaking, is expected to happen. Because the brain is being attacked and slowly shrinking and losing the ability to self-monitor.
So with the stats around, the oldest daughter taking care of the caregiving and the oldest son with the finances, did that apply to your situation?
No. So, my oldest sister was, she's the most medically trained, but my father didn't live with her. She asked for him to come live with her, and our stepmother said no because she was still married. So that did not apply. When it came to the money, we don't have a brother in my family. So my stepmother ran the money. She was very conservative. So it wasn't, like crazy making with the money. So we didn't have a lot to worry about. But when it came to getting him help, it took a lot of us to say, like, we would like him to go to the best, treatment they had in the state of Arizona at the time, which was the Barrows Institute, which is a neurological hospital down in Phoenix. And that's about 2 hours away. And she didn't want to go. She just wanted to take him to the Prescott Hospital, which is a little tiny rural community hospital. And they had really no experience with Alzheimer's.
So did your father plan financially for this?
He did. My father was a bit lucky in the sense that he had money left over from his father. But he did plan for his care. Now, there was no such thing as long-term care insurance that I remember hearing anything about when I was younger.
Right.
But I was also still an undergrad, so it wasn't like I was going over deep finances. He had just built a house. He had stocks, he had bonds, and he just, I think he had some life insurance that did cover some of the caregiving needs that needed to happen, but he had a budget, and so when my stepmother kind of took over, she started to pay for the caregivers, which was fine. That was in the budget. But then when he needed to get in a home, she found one that was within what I would call a budget, like that they could afford, and she could still live in the home and things like that. So my father was very lucky in the sense that they had plenty of money to take care of the immediate needs as well as the medication, the doctor copays, all that stuff, like the insurance. Like he had more than Medicare. And I don't remember, I think he worked for Honeywell, which is a very old company. I think it's still in existence, but at that time, my father, the fact that he'd worked there for over 30 years, he got a really good pension, and he had good healthcare insurance and stuff like that. Not everybody has that.
Right.
So he was one of those few people who just was very lucky in that sense. So he had a lot of what I'd say common support, and he had the cash to take care of himself, and it wasn't considered a drain.
Awesome. So you said that you also were caretaker for your mom as well.
Yeah, 17 years later, she was diagnosed.
And how old was she at that time?
She was, here's part of the problem. She probably developed the illness around 2005, 2006, around that time. Because my sisters and I were kind of mentioning that we thought something was different with mom. Like she'd always been a little bit forgetful, but she seemed to be worse. But she wasn't officially diagnosed until 2011. And there was a family member that chose not to take them in. They were with somebody else. That's the best way I can put it. And they decided not to take them to the doctor, and they had the medical power of attorney. So looking back now, again, we kind of had the same dynamics. My oldest sister offered to take care of our mom, but she lived across the country. And my mother's benefits were all in California at the time. And we were like, this is going to be a lot to get all of her insurance and everything sent over to Florida. And she actually had better care options in California than in Florida. I know that sounds weird, but that's true. We did do some looking into that. The expectation was that, she would be taken care of. And so we would fly in. And again, I was doing a bit more of the relief work. But when you kind of walk in and you can see things are dramatically different with your mother, and the person who says they've got it covered isn't covering it, then you have a whole nother issue. Looking back now, I think it would have been a lot smarter, this is my opinion, to call Adult Protective Services a lot sooner. But at the time, I thought it might be best to play nice, and nice isn't always the best answer. That's something that I remembered.
So was she remarried?
Well, that's kind of a complicated situation.
I guess the question is, did she have someone that was living with her that was kind of her caretaker day to day?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Got it. So, did she have long-term care insurance or the finances? Oh, awesome.
She did. And the person refused to use it, even though we said she had it.
Wow. So how do you, it seems like although your dad was diagnosed early, he had the money, he had he was set for his future, but it seems like when you talk about your mom's situation, it was quite different. So in hindsight, what do you feel like you would have love to have known or done differently? You mentioned one thing, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I mean, knowing what I know now, I would have moved in a lot differently with my sister Shannon, because she lived in Arizona. I had actually moved to the East Coast by this time. But knowing what I would have known now, my sister Shannon and I could have moved my mother to Arizona. That would have been doable. We could have done it and taken care of our mother. But, we would have had to really lawyer up to get it done. But I think that would have been the smartest choice because the power of attorney wasn't being handled properly. And of course, we're the type of family that now reaps the consequences of that because we saw a lot of things that we asked for things to be changed and they just weren't. My sisters did get visibly angry with this caregiver and it didn't change. So unfortunately, this was a legal matter. And that's what I mean. I really wish I would have understood the power of attorneys way better. I would have understood will and estate planning way differently. And a lot would have changed. And I would have changed it in 2005.
Yeah. When she was a little bit more cognizant of it, or?
Well, I would have taken her to the doctor. I would have asked my sisters for more support, that we were really concerned about that. I would have asked her to have the changes done to the will immediately.
Okay. So no one in your family, your sisters were not power of attorney. So you had really no.
We were always on the list. See, that's part of the issue sometimes when you get complicated family matters. We are on the list, but I was like number 4 because I was the youngest, because that's how they rate, because they're like, well, do you have any problems with this child? No, we'll put them on the list. But when you are dealing with a caregiver who is the primary, you have to go through them. Mm-hmm. Unless you can prove that there is an issue.
Which sounds like, to me, is more of a legal battle, which is hard to do, balancing the caregiving, knowing that they're declining, knowing that you're kind of on a timeline.
Yeah. So, and like I said, this is all hindsight. In 2005, I would have taken my mother, or 2004, I would have taken my mother directly to a will and estate attorney. And I would have had my sister Shannon and I to be primary. And we would have had it that way. And we would have been, then things would have been dramatically different. But there is sort of an older, if you will, mindset of a lot of times parents don't want to tell their kids about the money.
Of course.
So we were kind of coming up against that kind of uncomfortable conversation that neither my mother or my father really knew how to handle. So they assumed that by assigning other adults, if you will, in this case, it was another family member. And then, with my former stepmother, then yes, that seemed like the appropriate thing. And in fairness, I was in college. I mean, I wasn't really, for my dad, there was no way I was ready to take on any of the full responsibilities. But when it came to my mother, I was much more savvy. I was like, hey, hang on, let's look at this. Let's talk about this. And I would have been a little bit more careful. But unfortunately, as it happens, sometimes people just won't say anything, or the things that they do say isn't clear enough. And so you just don't have the right information.
So it sounds like a situation where you didn't really have enough control over your mother's health and welfare, and it was difficult to step in. So we're going to see these situations a lot. So what advice, like what are 5 tips or something you could give us or give women who may find themselves in the same situation to help themselves in hindsight, now that you know what you know?
Yeah. So one of the things that kind of happened through my careers, I also became a federal retirement readiness expert on the civil side, not the DoD side. And so I actually helped people who were aging, so meaning they were above 40. That's old age at the federal level. Anybody over the age of 40 is like considered an older employee. I was like,
oh my gosh,
numbers. You would think 60, but no. But anyway, that's like an ancient bureaucratic number that they came up with, and they just leave it.
Yeah. So tell us more about what that is and how it works.
So as a former federal retirement readiness expert, I actually worked with the employees that were perhaps in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, or very close to their retirement, who had an aging loved one, who needed to figure out how they could retire with their pension and with their resources. So they had we call the TSP, which is the federal retirement. It's kind of similar to a 401k. And then what were their plans? So this is a big thing. A lot of people don't have plans. They're like, well, I do want to do some traveling. I need to fix my house. And that's it. Like, that's all they got.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really not a lot. It's particularly if you retire at 62, unless you're planning on dying in 63, then you can get a lot done that year. But no, it's just, you've got to have a bigger and deeper plan. So really talking to them about the finances, but also the purpose, what's going to keep them motivated. So, because one of the big fears with federal employees and just any older employee is that if they quit, they're going to die.
Mm.
So they don't want to quit. Because
that's their fear.
That's and it's a real psychological fear they have. I don't want to quit because then I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
So when they've got aging parents, so one of the things I was really good at was like, here's how we have a caregiving discussion in the family, having all the parties present. This is one of the things that I wasn't really able to do with my father. I only kind of heard things as I was being told because I was so young. But when it came to dealing with my mother, I was trying to have as many caregiving conversations as I possibly could between my sisters and the family member that was taking care of her. But knowing what I know now, to be successful is you don't wait until all of a sudden you look a little strange or there's some type of thing going on that you can't put your finger on, or you are not ready to address possible health issues right now. The thing to do is to have it probably 5 to 10 years earlier. So if you're getting ready for your own retirement and you still have aging parents, you had better have this conversation. You would better find out at bare minimum, who is their attorney or accountant, who's handling their taxes, who's handling the state and the will, what type of power of attorney. And here's something that's huge. In certain states, you can't have just a medical power of attorney and then admit somebody into a care home or a cognitive unit. You have to have mental health power of attorney. And most attorneys don't even know this. Like when I got it for myself, like who has mental health power of attorney, they were like, oh, you don't need it. And I was like, no, that's not true. You need it. Let me tell you how the laws work. And
I never heard of a mental health power of attorney.
Nobody does. You know why? Because it creates more problems for families. And I want to talk thousands of dollars. You have to get a mental health power of attorney. First question is, has a psychiatrist seen them and declared them incompetent? Because that's how the ball gets rolling. And you've got to, a physician can do that technically with another physician, but there's laws around that about not doing that. Because what does happen to older people, there are plenty of statistics on this, is that if you have a doctor who agrees with a family member they're not doing well, and you give them something so they seem a little off, and then you get them admitted, and then you take all the money, which has happened for centuries. It's happened many times that people had money and family members got them admitted into a psychiatric facility or an asylum, and then everything went that way. And so the laws are there to protect the aging and the elderly, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
But you also need to follow the rules. And a lot of the rules is who's doing what? Do we need to do this? If they're going to move to a state, do you need to get the mental health power of attorney? Do you need to get that updated? If things are not going as planned, how do you have a discussion? Like who's going to take the lead, or do you need to hire a third party to ask these questions? Because a lot of times people don't even really care to go to the doctor. So that's like a huge hurdle. Like my first question is always when I talk to families and we're talking about this family caregiving component is, has anyone taken so-and-so to the doctor?
No.
Do they have any labs done? Any medical labs done? Anything? No. That's step one. Step one is you give either the doctor a letter or you email them ahead of time and say, this is what's going on with mom or dad or my aunt or my grandma. Here are my concerns. I'm going to be present for this, appointment. I'm going to ask so-and-so to sign a release of information so I can talk to you a little more freely. But this is what's going on. And then all of a sudden the doctors can talk to you. Because that's the other thing. People don't have a release. They don't realize that doctors can't really talk to you. That's nice. But they can't talk to you. They can listen, but they can't talk to you.
Wow.
And this is like part of that. This is like the medical and legal setup that people don't realize that they're walking themselves into. And we haven't even talked about the money yet.
So let's talk about it.
Let's dive in.
Okay. So when it comes to the money, also, do you have medical power of attorney? But do you also have what? Financial power of attorney.
Right.
And then the person who has financial power of attorney, do they understand what's going on with your money? Maybe not. So a lot of times it's good to know if they have, stocks or bonds or any type of investments, who handles that? Is it in the will? Like all these other things, what's going on with that? Because most people don't know what to do when it comes to financial care, and they don't know long-term care insurance enough, or they wait until suddenly they're sick and like, can we get it now? And you're like, well, it's going to be a lot of money now. It's the same thing if you never got Medicare B, because that's the outpatient piece. You never got it because you've been fine. You've been one of those like outliers. You've been great. And now you're 90. And if you want to get Medicare B, it's going to be a chunk of money, because now Medicare is going to penalize you for not getting Medicare B.
Right.
I don't agree with it, but I didn't write the statutes. I didn't write the regulations. That's called Congress. And I don't have time to litigate this matter either. And I'm not even an attorney. So you have to be savvy about what you want to do. Where's the cash going to come from? Because I think Dr. Barbara, you said about a third of all women, they end up in retirement in poverty, because they don't have the cash to take care of themselves. And this is like a great example. They're like, well, I have a home. Like, I think you might need to sell it. Do you need to do a reverse mortgage, which is very helpful if you need cash? Yeah. But a lot of times families will put the kibosh and say, no, because they are counting on that money to be given to them as their inheritance. That's a whole nother family dynamic.
Yep. Which is also like, okay, so are you going to pay out of pocket right now for the services, and then you get the home later? Is that the best situation for you? Because money's got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, these are difficult conversations for all of a sudden, you know, children who are adults, but they're still looked at as the children, step in to start taking over these responsibilities. Do you have a guide, or do you have some direction on how to facilitate these conversations?
Yes, my caregiver conference, which I've created really out of the need that I've seen just in my own professional experience, that I am offering in November. So the link will be, I hopefully attached to the podcast, but it's for people to sign up to realize that if you want to know how to do a caregiving conversation, I'll give you the steps. They're super easy, and you can just, you know, sign up and you can learn how to do that for free. If you want the recording, yes, you have to pay a little minor fee, but you know, there's a lot of times, you know, we want all this information, and it's like, well, you really want to maximize your time and your sanity and your money by being prepared. Because the people who aren't prepared, they're not going to come to my caregiver conference. So I'm not even worried about that. But the people who are diligent, who are thoughtful, who are responsible and want the best for their family, and it could even be a spouse that you're dealing with. Like I gave the example of my stepmother. She, you know, they weren't old people. They thought they were going to like a good 20 years together.
Yeah, that's tough. And you know, we're all busy with our day to day. It's not all of a sudden this is kind of falling into your laps. You know, mom fell down, or dad ran out, we can't find him, or, you know, something happens that triggers all of a sudden necessary conversations. And that's a difficult time to start, because people are emotionally, you know, wrought around what's happening to this person. And now what are we going to do?
Exactly. And the thought is that most of the time they think, oh, well, they have the money, and they might. But I just had a conversation the other day that this woman was like, she's grown, she's in her late 50s. And she thought like, you know, her mom and dad had everything taken care of. She didn't know that they had basically spent everything. So when her dad died, literally there was only $5,000 left, and she had to take care of her mom. She had no other choice but to move her mom into her home.
Yeah. We need to have these conversations early and often. In fact, it's just, you know, you need to have them when you're healthy.
Yes. You want to do like it. This is part of and that's what I taught with the retirement readiness. Do you have any aging loved ones? Okay. Are you getting to the point that you're becoming aging and you got to deal with your kids? And I would run into the same generational money, you know, problem of, well, I don't really want to talk to my kids about the money. It's like, well, you better talk to them about what you want for your care and how to access things when it's time.
Yeah, definitely. I've done some of that running around when it's like, oh, you're in the hospital. Now we got to go figure out how to pay your bills. You know, we got to run to the bank or do whatever it is. And so having these conversations early and often, and while people still have, you know, their right head on, you know, it's important just to have these conversations, because then there's less emotion and less, I don't even know, just anxiety with it.
Yeah, I mean, and what seems, you know, like we are so modernized, we're like, oh, pay it on an app, it's fine. Well, if you're not on the account for the utilities, you can't. And then they shut down the utilities, and then somebody's going to have to pay those utilities plus the fees.
Well, and a big mistake I hear is when women will say, well, I'm the beneficiary of my husband's 401k, you know, we'll just get money out of there. And they're like, you're a beneficiary, meaning you only can get money when he dies. So you can't use that money for his care.
That's why life insurance is really important to understand the particulars of the life insurance, because people are like, well, I'll just get that when they die. Yeah, maybe, but sometimes you can cash out a little bit sooner, but again, policies can be, really outrageous. But again, if you need money in a hurry, where is the cash coming from? Which is the whole point is hopefully you have enough money that you've invested wisely. The stock market is working in your favor. Your house is good, or you've sold it so that if you had to sell it and move into a condo, you're fine. That you can get out of the condo. It's not going to be an issue. But.
Got it. So as we wrap this up, what are some tips or some thoughts that you want to give, parting thoughts to the listeners today?
Yeah, I want to say that, if you are one of those, what I call conscientious and thoughtful caregivers, and even though we're kind of talking about some of the extreme situations that, people are getting into, we didn't really spend a lot of time about how to help you take care of yourself. Like, what are some of the things that you want to do? Working out is great, but are you keeping your mind mentally strong? Are you keeping it agile? Are you able to think clearly? Because when you don't, this is when financial mistakes, this is when medical mistakes are made day in and day out in families. So it's really important that you have a resource. It's really important that you have professionals supporting you, which is why I created this caregiver conference. What I call the VIP live roundtable is I have all the financial and medical experts there so that you can ask a question in real time, get it recorded and keep it. And then you actually get their name and number so you can call them if you need their support. So you are not like going, what am I supposed to do? How am I going to get all this done? Because it takes a lot more energy to take care of yourself, to take care of your family, have a job, and take care of a family member. The energy is exponential.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that sounds like a great conversation to be part of, and to have just all those resources in your back pocket just in case, or just when something does come up. As we all do age, we know the swell of baby boomers are getting older, and we know caretaking is going to come one day for all of us.
Yeah, I think this is a great opportunity also to put a link to our family emergency guide that we have in the show notes as well. What it does is it just allows you to open the conversation and capture important information from your parents and have it all in one place at your fingertips too. And all these resources are starting to pop up and be at your fingertips so that when you need to start having the conversations, you'll know kind of the direction to take, when to step in. Jeannie's given some terrific information here today. So thank you, Jeannie, so much for sharing your stories, but also what you've learned and how you're sharing your experiences with, women and men out there who really need to take care of their aging parents so that it's not a stressful situation, but that they can manage it as best they can. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, fearless listeners. We will see you at the next podcast.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.
Purse Strings offers an available for hire network of vetted professionals who specialize in serving women. When you have a life event that has suddenly made money a priority, you can now move forward with a whole new confidence that you're getting advice and services from savvy professionals who are uniquely equipped to serve your needs. Go to pursestrings.co and use our directory of handpicked financial professionals when you're ready to plan for retirement, navigate divorce, buy your next home, fire up your new business, and more. Go to pursestrings.co or check the link in the show notes. Now you can be financially fearless.